So hello everyone. This is a new installment of the Never-Ending Journal Club, and we are going to discuss a very interesting paper today. But before we start, let us quickly introduce ourselves, and I will ask Angus to go first.
Okay. Hello, I'm Angus. I'm a postdoc at NOW's lab, and I'll be talking about the paper today. So yeah.
Thank you. And Anson?
Yep, so I am from the same lab as Angus and Niles. I'm hoping to start PhD soon, and yeah, and seems to be a very interesting paper. Yeah.
Thank you. And Mike?
Hi, I'm Mike. I'm from the same lab. I'm a second year PhD student, and that's me.
Amazing. And Zoe?
Hi, I'm Zoe. I'm a PhD candidate at Martin Monti's lab at UCLA, also working with now.
And Davide?
I'm from same university as Angus and Mike and Anson, but different lab from the N3CS, and I'm a PhD student there.
Amazing. And yeah, my name is Aniko, and I'm a postdoc in the same lab as everyone else. So yes, we can just start with the paper presentation. So I will give the words to Angus.
You see a title slide.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So we're all gathered here today to talk about this paper, but not really this paper. We're here about this new color that this paper is claiming to have made people see, which I think is really interesting. So let's just get right to it. So the main thing of the paper is actually presenting this thing called Oz, which is this principle for displaying colors in a sense of how, you know, when your monitor is has all these pixels, and to display some sort of image, we sort of manipulate the pixel values. Oz is basically doing that, but at the level of the photoreceptors up the retina. So the idea is basically you can sort of image the retina and then classify the photoreceptor types beforehand. And then in a live manner, you can just stimulate individual receptors using this microdose of laser light. And the interesting thing about doing this is that in principle, you can stimulate photoreceptors in some sort of pattern which they normally don't get stimulated in. For example, the big thing that they focus on is this M cone. So as we know, we have like three types of cones in the human eye, S, M, and L, corresponding to short and longer wavelengths of light. And these M cones, the sensitivity of these M cones, shown here in the green line here, overlaps completely with the sensitivities of the short and the long cones. So naturally, or in nature, or with natural stimuli, basically these M cones are never stimulated in isolation. And so the idea is if we do this sort of thing, then we can stimulate M cones only. But just before they go into that, they first just describe, you know, if you classify these photoreceptors, and then what you can do is you can sort of have a map of all the receptors there, and you take a little square, and within this square, you can activate these receptors. And the reason you take this little square is because when you're focusing on something, your eye still moves. So the idea is, even if this whole thing moves a little bit, the receptors around, you know, here might move into this target square, but because you've already pre-classified, they're still valid for activating. And I think they can do this at a rate of, for some sort of stimulus, at 60 frames per second. So within each frame, they can stimulate everything in this region here. So just in terms of process, here they just show that if you have some sort of target stimulus, you can convert that into the sort of expected required cone activation to create that image on the retina. So you can see here, like for the reddish face, there's a lot of red cone activation. And then where there's more blue and green activation. And this is just zoomed in here. And then basically what they do is when you stimulate these photoreceptors, you don't actually need to stimulate using a red wavelength or green wavelength or whatever, although the wavelength matters. What matters is basically you can just map this sort of thing into just some sort of intensity value, where you just send one single wavelength of light at varying values, and that will stimulate the photoreceptors, so that you can get the image pattern on the retina. And then the details here are just this 0.9 degree square of visual degree, which is, I think the thumb is like 2 visual degrees if it's an arm's length or something. So it's about half the length of the width of your thumb. The frame rate is 60 hertz. And yeah, this number here, 10 to the 5 stimulations to each receptor, I think is what they said in the paper. So it's very fast, 10 to the 5 each second. And they can track the eye movement at 960 hertz, and there's a latency. So those are the details there. Yeah, I don't know the exact, how the thing works, but there's lots of technical details, and it's built off other processes which have been published previously, which I didn't read about. So, but yeah, I think it's pretty impressive that we have something that works this fast and accurately now. So yeah, in terms of what it sort of looks like to participants, what people do is they look at some sort of fixation point, and the region of photoreceptors is actually 4 degrees next to it, so it's not the fovea. And this sort of square is where they do their Oz stimulation. And if you show these things like this, if you activate these particular cones, you can get a red percept here. If you activate like this, you can get green, you can get blue. You can show some sort of vertical bar or some sort of circle within here. And people can see it. And this is what the cone activation looks like. And this is just the kind of like, if you ignore the specific cone type and just look at the activations. So here you can see like the activation is fairly uniform across the field, but because of the types of cones activated, people can see this red bar, which I'll just go into later. They show these complicated images here, but I didn't notice any results about them. So I don't know if this is just for illustrative purposes or if people can actually see these detailed images. So maybe the first results to focus on is just to confirm that people do actually see something from this Oz stimulation. So the authors have this just sort of test experiment where they just see if participants can identify the orientation of this bar. So they have it vertically, horizontally, and diagonally. And when participants and it's presented on this teal sort of background, which I'll go into later, which is the new color that they show. So what they show here is that if participants are forced to make a choice, a alternative forced choice between these orientations, they can do the task pretty much perfectly. And the control condition is where instead of stimulating a particular cone, what they do is they jitter the stimulation to like within 2 cones, 2 neighboring cones sort of distance. So instead of precisely targeting this blue cone, they might jitter it so that it hits the red or the green cones next to it. And when you do this jittering, participants' accuracy go to chance. So that confirms that it's this specific when the specific cones are activated, they do see something, and then when it's jittered, they just completely lose everything. And they also had this rotation task. So this circle here is moving, either clockwise or anti-clockwise. And similarly, participants are able to identify which direction it's rotating in. And again, when you jitter the stimulation, performance drops to chance. So that confirms that they see the thing. And before getting to the this new color, I just want to go through this sort of theoretical thing which they give up as one of the sort of main things, which is depending on the wavelength of the laser light, you can sort of reach different colors in terms of like what can be experienced. And also because this technology actually isn't perfect, so it's not actually stimulating directly individual photoreceptors. It's some of the light is actually leaking onto neighboring sort of photoreceptors. So here they're just illustrating the effects of different wavelengths and the effects of light leakage. So on the left here, each of these gray triangles shows the range of colors or range of theoretically stimulatable colors within this S, L, and M cone sort of coordinate space, where like if you fully stimulate only the M cones, you would be in this top corner here. If you only stimulate the L cones, you would be over here. And then this is just looking at one particular wavelength of light, 488 nanometers, which I can't remember the color of. But this is one wavelength, and if like 90% of the color of this light leaks into neighboring photoreceptors, then this is a sort of theoretical sort of range of colors or gamut of colors that you can actually sort of stimulate. And then if you can perfectly stimulate, cone, only the particular cone that you want to stimulate, so this light leakage of 1%, then you can sort of reach this entire space. And what the authors say is that in this case, what they have here is this, they have roughly 1/3 of the light is stimulating the cone and 2/3 is leaking into neighboring photoreceptors. So this is a sort of theoretical sort of color space which they can reach with their Oz display at this wavelength. And then here, this is looking at if you just fix at this 67% leakage triangle, if you then change the wavelength to like 400 to 700, then these are the ranges that you would be able to reach with the stimulation. So corresponding to 488 here is this triangle roughly here, which is just the same one as this. And in this paper, they use this 488 here and this 543 nanometers, so, which is this green region, which looks almost like a line here. So I've just highlighted the details. So they have this leakage of roughly 2/3 of the light is going elsewhere, like neighboring photoreceptors, and they use these particular wavelengths of light. So 488 is this sort of tealish color, and 543 I think is this greenish color. That could be wrong, but it's what's shown here. So what they do is they try to stimulate somewhere in this triangle here, right? Outside of this this colored region, which is the sort of normal range of vision that we can get through just natural stimuli. So what they do is they try to stimulate in this sort of region here or this sort of region here where it's outside the normal color range that we can experience. And so when they do that, they also want to kind of check what people are seeing. So they have this color matching task. And basically what they do is they show the participants they stimulate the photoreceptors using this Oz display, and then they also show another just a projector sort of stimulus, so just like a normal screen stimulus. And basically participants have to adjust this sort of patch of color to match as closely as they can with what they're experiencing with the Oz display. And they can adjust hue, saturation, and value. And because this display can't stimulate the photoreceptors in the same manner as the Oz display, what participants can also do is they can add this white light to the Oz stimulation. In addition to the Oz stimulation, they can add this sort of white light from the screen. And what this does is it reduces the saturation of that perceived color. And basically by doing these adjustments, they try to match as closely as they can. They also have another laser, which they can adjust the wavelength of and the intensity to again try to match the color to the Oz stimulated color. And they can also add white light to this as well. So what it looks like is, so this is what I showed before. What they do is in this square here, they show the they do the Oz stimulation for 1 second, and then they show another second of the color from the laser or the RGB projector, and then followed by 1 second of nothing here. And it just repeats. And then every 30 seconds, we have this refresh period just to sort of remove any sort of adaptation or After Effects type stuff. And they just show this whole sort of mosaic thing. They have 15 mosaics and each last 1 second, so it's a 15-second period. Participants are also able to view this Oz stimulation and the projector or the laser side by side vertically, so on top of each other. But before they can actually submit a match, they have to switch back to the 1 second, 1 second, 1 second sort of display, and they can submit if they don't change or adjust the values, the color values for I think, yeah, for 12 seconds. For 12 seconds, and the refresh has to have been also in that 12 seconds. So if it's at the end of the 30 seconds, then they have to go through the refresh and then just confirm that their adjustments are right. So these here are the results, and they're a little complicated, and every time I look at this, I forget something. So the main thing here is if you just focus on these colored dots with the black circles around them, this is the matching of the Oz stimulus to the RGB projector stimulus. Okay, so or maybe that's not the best place to start. Maybe I'll walk through the key first. So maybe the first thing is actually this stimulation wavelength, white point, color match gamut, and natural human gamut. So again, the colored region corresponds to the natural sort of space of colors, which we can expect to see from natural stimuli. And then the color match gamut is which is this sort of triangle outline here, is the space of colors which can be adjusted to by the participant in order to try and match the color to the Oz stimulated color. And you can see that it doesn't actually fully extend to the full color space, which people can see. So these points out, which are outside this triangle, actually correspond to this white light addition to the Oz stimulus. So by adding this white light, it changes the coordinate, and I'm not going to go into those details, but it changes the coordinate so that it can go outside of this space. And that's why you see these points outside of this triangle here. And so now if we go back to this, these colored circles, basically this is matching, well, this is the coordinate in this space after accounting for this white light, which best matches, which the participant has chosen as best matching the Oz stimulus for a particular Oz stimulated color. So here, this is the Oz display stimulating a red sort of cone activation, and then this one is a green cone activation, and then blue cone activations. And And then this one here is sort of a little further out than, or it's stimulating more than just green. This is stimulating the green, the medium cones, and some of the short cones, the blue cones. And the interesting colors are these ones here, these greenish colors, which are stimulating only the M cones. And as you can see, they're completely, or they're outside the natural sort of color space which we can reach. Whereas the other colors, the red and orange and the blue, they are within the color space here. And so the difference between the top and bottom here is actually just the stimulation of the laser. And as you can see, even though the stimulating laser has different wavelengths, you can get these colors to match anyway. And this M cone activation remains outside of the natural color space. And the main thing is also this this jitter control. So this jittering that I said before, where you shift where the laser light falls so that it's not exactly on the photoreceptor that you want. If you jitter it, basically what people see is the color of the stimulating laser, because you lose that position. So they see the laser color. So because this color match range for the RGB display doesn't actually reach the edge of this natural sort of color range that we can see, they also use the laser. So that's down here. So here they are matching to this, they're adjusting the laser color, which they can see, which is not the Oz display, it's a separate laser. And because they use a laser, you can apparently reach the edge of this color range that we can see. And because they use this and participants still match to locations outside of this laser adjustment range, they say that this is like proof that the color is, definitely outside the range that we can see. And then, so in addition to this color matching task, they also ask participants to just do a more free kind of name the color that you see. So just give a description, I guess. And the description that they give is this teal, green, blue, greenish, green, a little blue. And after giving this, they're also asked to give a saturation rating. So how saturated is that color? And so when they select colors, when they're selecting the colors to match what they see, they give an average rating of roughly 3 out of 4, but the saturation rating that they give for the OZ display color OLO is 4 out of 4. So the authors describe it as like this teal color, which is really, really saturated, more saturated than I guess you can normally see. And those are the main things. So some points which the authors bring up is the problem of scaling up. So it's just this very small sort of region of the retina that they can do. And if you want like this 2.2 degrees by 2 degree region, you need another order of magnitude in terms of identifying the cones, or like the number of cones that you can identify. And you also need to go up 2 orders of magnitude to stimulate all those cones in a manner that you'd be happy with to get the precision and speed that to get some sort of image. And they also raise, although this is not in their discussion, they raised it earlier, they raised that there is another way of stimulating only M cones, which is to sort of basically fatigue the L cones through adaptation. So you just show red light until they're completely fatigued. And then after that, you can display green light and they won't respond. But they say that there's an issue with this in that it's difficult to measure precisely, and they don't really go into detail. So I wonder just how much of an issue that actually is, or whether you can actually do something with that, because this is obviously a lot cheaper to do, right? And then they also bring up an idea of, with this technology, because you can stimulate individual photoreceptors, you can kind of simulate having a different photopigment type. So basically having another photoreceptor type by just selectively stimulating particular photoreceptors, which I thought was an interesting idea. Like if you sort of create this artificial, if you sample all the receptors and just treat these guys as like potentially responding to a different wavelength of light, then do we actually see something different or not? I'm not sure about it, but that's what the authors bring up. And then just to finish, maybe some ideas which I had when reading it, which is, so the authors use this matching task and the naming task to sort of to understand what the color is. But I'm wondering if what we do, which is this similarity rating task, whether we can actually use this to better understand what the color is without having actually seen it, or whether it doesn't actually give anything new. And then just an out there, like a really out there idea, if the distribution of LMS cones is different for each individual, maybe we can actually generate images which only an individual can see. So there's maybe some sort of, security or like, this futuristic sort of communication application there. So yeah, that's it.
Yay, amazing. I guess that was so good. And also a very kind of technical paper, so great stuff. Okay, so now we can continue with our Q&A and discussion. So does anyone have any kind of main questions? Please feel free to jump in.
I just want to say that it's kind of depressing, right? In the sense that the people have just seen a color that no one has ever seen before. They have no memory or knowledge of it, and they immediately know what the color is similar to, which is a teal greenish blue, and people seem to be relatively consistent about it. It seems to suggest that qualia structure, the structure experience of color, involve not only the color that we normally can see, but also the colors that we can possibly see. And the author is only focusing on the cone activation. But what about, let's say, V4 activations? What are there other color possible beyond just this Gamu triangle? And if we want to understand human color experience, do we have to look all of the colors, all the possible colors? Is that like what we are aiming for? That was just my thought on the paper.
Yeah, so that's a maybe David is more well positioned to answer that question, whether we need to look at all possible color experiences to get like this qualia structure and to fully like get what someone is experiencing, or whether you can just look at a subset or not, a subset of that. But one thing I will comment on is this notion of stimulating the brain regions responsible for color versus stimulating the retina. I think this is already like really a great step because stimulating the brain is very invasive, right? Super invasive, and it's super complicated in that we don't have something as simple as what we have in the retina, which is like these cones, are definitely, related to this wavelength of light or whatever. Whereas when you get to neurons in the brain, you don't really know what the neurons are doing. You have a receptive field type thing or whatever, but you don't, it's a lot more high level and abstract, I guess, and invasive. But this, even though, when I first saw like the media sort of articles about this, I'm like a laser pointed into your eye. It sounds pretty invasive and maybe dangerous, but at least relative to stimulating the brain directly, it's not that invasive at all. So yeah. Davida, did you want to say something about like having to look at all color experiences possible to get like this qualia structure that Mike was ultimately asking about?
Yeah. I also find it very interesting that when you stimulate the retina in a way that has never stimulated before, the whole visual system is perfectly able to give you the experience of the color. So with no training, I think that has implications that we should uh, keep in mind, because it really looks like we have this machinery in our brain, these models, for example, the opposite processing system, that really in the end can get any input, and they will just provide the output according to their equations. It doesn't really matter, like it doesn't really need to be trained on that. And yeah, like I wonder that does it seems to me like a little bit of a problem for a structuralist position on qualia. Usually when people talk about these structuralist positions, they talk about all the they consider as the quoting spaces is relevant for determining the ephemeral character of qualia. They consider all the possible experiences that can be in principle experienced. So yeah, what I took from this is that if we make discussions about qualia and structuralism by looking at the CLab color solid, for example, which is not currently the best guess of what the quality space for a color would be. Well, that's in reality that's quite tentative, and we probably we need to add more volumes around that solid. So yeah, I think we need to be careful to draw inference using that.
Francesca, I think you have your hand up.
Yeah. Thank you, Angus, so much. It was a great summary of the paper. I actually have the opposite intuition than Davide on this topic. I think so. There are two considerations. First consideration is that when we talk about structuralist approach, and I think this is something that is sometimes overlooked. We we can have different different structures based on different relations, and we can also arguably combine those relations to have even richer structures, right? So I don't think the goal should be or like the assumption should be that we are charting the space based on all possible experiences, because first of all, as in case like this, there might be experiences that we may not be able to access in ordinary states, but also there might be different relations that we could look at to determine this particular structure. So I think actually this case, if anything, it illustrates that the space of possibilities when we talk about, for example, color qualia, might be and likely is much bigger than we normally assume. So I don't think at all this is a problem from the structuralist approach, or in particular the qualia structure approach, which is the one I'm interested in too. But I think it simply remind us that we are most like commonly we are looking at a subset of the possible space. So in fact, a paper like this, an experiment like this, they, if anything, they open more possibilities even to have more empirical testing for this structuralist assumption. And for example, the thing that I was thinking reading the paper would be it would be a very good test, a very interesting test to see if the quality. So first of all, it would be very interesting to have a similarity rating task based on this new color, so to say, which of course could be quite difficult, but maybe not impossible. And this is one thing. But the other thing, maybe more simple, could be to assess. So participant that never experienced this color, you first assess their color quality structure, and then they experience this color, and then you see if there are sensible changes in the, so to say, standard or reduced ordinary qualia structure color. And I think this would be extremely valuable, both for the internal validity of the structuralist approach or the qualia structure approach, but it would be even particularly interesting to test a different hypothesis, which is something, for example, that as brought forward by proponents of IIT, that our specific experience, or especially in the previous version, that our specific experience depends on the possible experience that we can have. So the interesting question would be, is this color already present in the repertoire of possible color? I would say, IIT would say yes, because as we said, like the fact that we never enter that specific state doesn't prevent the states to exist according to the IIT perspective. So in this sense, this could actually be a first step, at least, to empirically test this assumption. But it could also be something that tells us more about the structuralist approach in general. And I don't think at all it would disqualify from completely. And in fact, I think it could enrich it and tell us something more about the qualia structure. So sorry for this impromptu comment, but I was listening on the background. So I'm very interested if anyone has comment on this.
I actually have some comments if no one else. Okay, so something that I was actually thinking about specifically in this saturation rating. I think that's a super interesting aspect of the paper, that people have been on average saying that most of their color experience is not maximally saturated, but then this intense was this maximally saturated experience, which I find very interesting in that I don't necessarily know what they mean. Like how can you, what is saturation in, like, okay, that's like a very pure and bright and like specific color experience, but I don't know. I don't remember if they have defined the saturation in the paper very clearly, because there's also like this general understanding of, oh, what saturation is, but what really saturation is, I would be very curious to kind of dig into this.
You mean when the participants were rating the saturation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that also wasn't clear to me either, whether they rated the matching color first, and then the OLO, OLO, or whether they saw the OLO color first, and that set the reference point for them to compare. Because yeah, as I think you're bringing up, if they just saw the non-Oz display color, they might have already rated that as maximum saturation possible, because that in whatever context, that's as much as it could be. So maybe if it's in isolation, they just read it as 4 saturation. But in this case, maybe because they saw this OLO, which just feels more saturated or something, that could be why they rated that as 4, and the matching color is not 4, perhaps.
Yeah. But then, so two things on that. So one of my first comments would be, I wouldn't necessarily say that a less color saturated version of a color is a different color. So then I would maybe potentially argue that people in fact have seen this color, but maybe a different version of it. And saying that, oh, this is a completely new color might be a bit kind of misleading, or maybe a kind of stretching some of these definitions, because I think for most people, if you just say that, hey, there's a red and there's a less saturated red, they wouldn't say that, oh yeah, there's a completely different color. I never experienced this before. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is, I wonder whether saturation is kind of a term or an experience that is actually connected to something else as well. And because I have been working on the vividness of experience and specifically with derealization and how can people experience the world as less vivid, saturation was in fact one of the variables that I have been playing around with. And I wonder if maybe saturation is at least on the experience level connected to something about novelty or something about like a strangeness or something about a very a very clear experience or a very specific experience, something that maybe this Olo experience was just kind of yeah, maybe that was because it was new, and maybe it was there was yeah, like I don't necessarily know if, and I think it would be very interesting to see how people kind of come up with this saturation rating, and whether maybe the novelness or like some aspect of this color experience and also the experimental condition was also giving people like maybe they were more prone to experience this or describe this color as a very saturated version, even though it may have been not as saturated, but it was maybe a novel or a strange, or like maybe they didn't have another word to describe it. And that was, they kind of used saturation as like an additional, like a way to express the strangeness of the experience. I don't know. What do you guys think about this thought?
Yeah, so maybe while others are thinking of responses, I think the authors do mention somewhere that like even with this saturation thing, they're not sure that it's like a complete match with what they see. It was some sort of detail, so I didn't like go into it too much, but I think the authors do discuss it, so definitely go into the paper and just read what they say about that. And for this novelty thing, I thought that was an interesting idea, how, if there's something very strange or new, then people might give it a higher saturation rating. That's what you're saying, right? And I'm just wondering, this description of like strongly saturated, it reminds me of this other After Effects or illusion thing where if you fixate on something and then look at a different color, you can reportedly perceive like a hyper saturated, like a really dark blue, which is darker than black or something, or like a really hyper saturated orange or something. I can't remember what it's called, but I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about. I'm just wondering if this is what they see here with this Olo color, whether it's kind of a similar experience to that. They say there are ways of stimulating the M cones, right? Just from fatiguing the other cones. So is this experience from this display kind of just similar to doing that, or is it different? That's something I wonder. Yeah. And because you can sort of induce it, or like at home, just looking at the screen, if you can find what it's called, yeah, reading the description and then experiencing it, I also question this description of highly saturated, right? Like the first time you see it, you might be, oh yeah, that's it's like super saturated. But then you do it again and then you go, it's like a blue and it's like an orange or something. It's not like something that's really, really different. So yeah, I think those are good points.
Oh, sorry. Maybe other people can.
Oh, Francesco can go. No? Well, okay.
Just
I was
a quick.
go for it.
No, I was just saying that this is precisely why I think the qualia structure similarity rating approach is particularly interesting, because it seemed to reduce this kind of artifacts.
I was just gonna say, so saturation, I thought means like how pure the color is. So like the less so when they're adding white light to the stimulus, they're making it less saturated because you're adding more like different kinds of wavelengths to the stimulus, right? So it's becoming less saturated. And the more that it's just like a single wavelength, it's more saturated. So that's how I understood saturation. And so to me, it kind of made sense that people would say this is like a super saturated green, because in natural settings, like the kind of green that you see is never just from the stimulation of the M cone. So it's always somewhat mixed with other wavelengths. I don't know if I'm like totally butchering that understanding, but so that kind of made sense to me. And then I just thought of one thing when Aniko talked about like the novelty, or like if there's something that goes along with saturation. And saturation, I think, is considered to be integral with brightness. I think so. If you have like 3 dimensions to color perception, or to color the hue, brightness, and saturation, I think saturation and brightness you can't really independently judge. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. Anson, you go.
Yeah, I've got a comment that is somewhat related to the saturation idea. I feel like I've not structured my thought very well, so it may be a very bum idea, but please entertain me. So the idea I'm thinking at is that like we are so like I assume all the participants here are adults. There's no like child or people who are still having their visual processing developing. So I assume the idea would be that like we are already very in tune with analyzing like naturally occurring lights, like lights that are usually not just M isolatedly stimulated. It will be usually accompanying L and S. So that leads to the language issue, where we simply perhaps don't have the language capacity to explain this very weird color that we may see but cannot like pronounce it in words or describe it in words. And the second idea that leads to that would be, would there be, because of our I want to say, I don't want to use the word structure, but I don't have a better word for it, like a neurological structure, like our brain is so in tune with processing these M currents in association with S and L, that when we have this separate isolation, like the structure simply does not afford us to perceive a newer color, or a color that will be very close, like we're not capable of generating a very specific qualia for this M isolated stimulation, as opposed to a S stimulation, which would be blue, distinct from the L stimulation, which would be a little bit closer to red, if I remember correctly. So in that regards, I'm wondering if like we were doing this experiment on, say, people who are still developing their um visual processes somewhere in the childhood, like 2 or 3 years old, would they have a similar experience as us, just because they are their structure a little bit more flexible and therefore a little bit less in tune with the naturally occurring scenarios? That's just some questions that I have in my mind. Yeah. Anyone has any responses or maybe a new idea? I don't know.
Yeah, but maybe just to rephrase or just check that I understood. So you're sort of like saying there's, again, I always forget the words. There's a word like neurons which fire together sort of become connected, right? And so what you're saying is that if sort of if these are adults, and every time the neurons which are connected to these M cones fire, the neurons connected to the and S cones also fire. So in this case, maybe when you stimulate only the M cones, you're also stimulating the neurons in the brain which are associated with the L or S sort of cones as well. And so the question is, well, in children or infants or whatever, whether this sort of connectivity is already there or not. And if it's not there and you stimulate the M cones, then they could be having a different experience to what the adults are having, right?
Yeah, you're putting in my point way better than I could. Yes.
I see. It's an interesting idea.
Or if not, maybe then Mike? I think he raised his hand next. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just still hanging on to the idea that by engaging in new experience, like completely new experience, we may be able to in some way alter the color structure itself. Or would that also imply that people who have seen the color Olo may afterward, they may see the everyday color a little bit differently than before they seen the color Olo? Is that correct, or am I making some kind of logical error here?
That's
I think,
Austin, Davido, and Francesco, right?
Yes.
yeah. So I think there are basically two hypotheses, right? One is that you have every color experience is on itself. So that's fair enough. Now people that saw this color simply saw one additional color. Maybe they have a memory of it, but just that. And then there is the second option, so to say, that your possible or other experience affects your current experience. So as you experience color throughout your life, the way you experience, let's say, color A, color B, color C, this will affect your perception of color A, color B, color C, color D, right? But there is also this let's say, second case also is about the possibility of experiencing different colors affects your color. So in that sense, the question I was pondering was if if people that experience that color now see other colors differently or slightly differently, which is most likely, this, for example, would contradict IIT assumption that just the possibility of seeing that color, which is already there for, if we take the study as correct, all of us could see that color, right? We just never had this specific artificial condition that put us in that state. So that for IIT would say, yes, the potential experience of that color plays a role, at least IIT 3.0, plays a role in the way you experience red, blue, and all the colors you normally see, but you simply never had that. But someone maybe could argue that, so contradicting IIT, for example, that the fact that you experience that color once now changes your future experiences of color because of this relational approach to color. I think these are two different positions. And of course, I have no idea which one is the correct one, but that was what I was suggesting.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question to that? So what role does the hardware play in IIT's argument about the possible experiences? Because in this case, it wasn't possible, right? Because given the structure of the retina and like how or I guess given how the cone cells activate to wavelengths of light, we were never like it was not possible to have just the M cones activate by itself, and we're doing so artificially. And so like, does that count as a possible experience, or is it just an entirely new thing that wasn't possible? Does that make sense?
So this, I will speak from the perspective of IIT, but this, of course, it depends on how you induce the experience, right? I think in this case, it would be that the suggestion would be that this is a possible experience, that it's already in the repertoire of possible experience, but we simply never enter that specific state. If you think about it, like the actual states most physical system is, including our brain or our organism, is just a tiny little fraction of all the possible states that that system could be, sorry, right? Especially as the system scales up. Like there are countless potential states that we simply will never enter, most likely.
I think
And
if I can add to Francesco, because I see like Zoe looks confused, but and not just Zoe, but like other people are looking confused. But like maybe if I can, it sounds like there are two sort of levels of possibility which you're getting at. So Zoe is talking about like sort of natural possibilities, and then Francesco, you're talking about like what sort of a different level of possibility. And so maybe if I can just like help, if this helps to clarify, like say you have a new computer, and then on your new computer there's like a pre-installed program which you don't know of, you never know of, it's not relevant to you. So in the sense of it existing or being used, it's not possible for it to be used because you're never going to use it. But it is there on the computer, sort of thing. I don't know, does that help? Does that analogy help at all?
I think you can simply, sorry.
No, Francesco, please.
I think you could simply, especially like this is quite clear if you look at a transition probability matrix in IIT for like a even super small system, and you simply check one system and you see what are the states that it will lead you most likely, or the distribution of probability, right? And then you basically look and you see that depending on which state you are or you start from, you will follow a certain path, right? But then there are states that, for example, there is state 1 leads you to state 2 and state 2 leads you to state 1. So unless you start or artificially get into state 1 or 2, you will never enter those states, but they are still there in the state space. And if you think about something as complex as a biological system or even a physical system, like there are countless possible, like immense number of possible configuration that you simply never enter. And now this is all particularly interesting. Why you never enter some of the states? Well, most likely because most of these states will lead you to the disgregation of the system, right? So the fact that we don't enter those states is, in a sense, is what in philosophy could even call like a transcendental principle. So the fact that we are the way we are implies that we don't get into those states regions, right? But when we think about science in general, or like just causal approaches, that's the most important thing, that you can actually set variables in a state rather than simply observe them and such. And this is what gives you a counterfactual approach, and what gives you like arguably a causal explanation. And this is was formalized by Judea Pearl, a mathematician, a very super great mathematician, when he introduced this do operator, which basically said that this is not just the state of the variable as observed, but this is an intervention that you're making on the system to set that variable in that state. And this is a super important to assess causation versus correlation, which is the probably most important things that science can do.
I want to just quickly, and then I will let David talk, but I don't know, I want to push back and support Zoe's argument a bit, because I feel like the fact that something cannot by definition occur in nature in any ways, that should, like, unless it's actually the case that you can have these experiences if you are completely, and maybe it is possible to have this like this adaptation effect on the red cone, and you could actually have these experiences. I think if it would be physically impossible to induce this experience without any intervention, like an external intervention, I don't know why would it make sense to add that as a potential experience. Because, okay, so for example, there are like, I think there are some weird examples where you can create different tastes, or I don't know, different sensory experiences that would otherwise never be possible to experience, but with like equipment and chemicals, you can now create them. So then, is everything that we could possibly create at any point, is that should be kind of counted as a possibility?
Yeah, I point on this. So I think I'm on the same page of Francesco, so correct me, Francesco, if I'm not. So I think, yeah, possibility depends, possibility of what? Like, because one thing is considering just the possibility of the brain, and one thing is considering the possibility that the brain has given the possible input that it can get in a natural condition. Like if you add also this natural type of input that you can receive, then in reality what you're doing, you're constraining the possibilities of the brain, because the brain is going to react to the stimulus that it gets. And while I think that the IAT and also structuralism is concerned just with the brain. So so you're not putting constraints on the kind of input that you're receiving. So in this case, yeah, the space of possibility is much broader, and you should consider that for IAT and structuralism. This is what. And so I had two other points, but then maybe we can continue on this discussion. I will raise them later.
Yeah, so I think what you said earlier is precisely the point. So the fact that people can experience that color without training, right? Because that's a subtle point, but one could argue that if there has been some kind of training, probably the physical system itself is not the exact same one that we are taking into consideration. The fact that you can have this experience is basically as Angus was saying, like this experience was already programmed, but you simply never access it, right? Or at least that's my position. Now, talking about possibility, I think we can distinguish at least three kinds of possibility. The metaphysical possibility, which is what philosophers do, and probably all of you ate, which is, for example, the zombie argument, which it sounds like a crazy argument, and most people misunderstand that argument. But the argument is absolutely sound if you accept certain premises. Now, the point is that those premises probably are not really relevant if you're doing science. They're relevant if you're doing maybe certain kind of philosophy, but not necessarily for science. Science should be, or I think it is, concerned with what is called, or what philosophers call, nomological possibility. And nomological possibility is this idea of what is possible within the laws of nature, or then of course you would have to define those as well. But like basically, I don't know. I guess it's impossible that I pass through a wall or something like that, right? This simply cannot happen based on the rule of the game that is this word. And then again, there is, maybe we can think another kind of possibility, which is what Zoe was hinting to, which I would maybe call ecological possibility. So something that, given the standard, so to say, input that you receive, is or is not possible. So for example, it's nomological possible that I experience this new color, but it's not ecological possible because I need some very specific condition. But to make just a super quick example, you can maybe not, but you can imagine that one of my ancestors in the Stone Age was exactly like me, or like very similar to me, or maybe I can time travel to, and in that circumstances, for example, I would be very different because I had the eye surgery, so now I can see very well without glasses. But my sort of natural or ecological state uh, did not allow me foresee so well without glasses, right? So, well, let's forget about the Stone Age example that is just more complicated. But just to focus on that more simple point, what does it mean? It means that maybe I would have again in a era where this technology did not exist, maybe I would have not survived the natural selection or something like that. But I'm here and I'm alive because of that possibility. So I think the boundaries between nomological and this ecological possibility is very thin and is kind of constantly adjourned. So I think looking at nomological possibility is very important, especially because the brain has no idea whether the stimulus is a natural one or a very artificial one, such as in this case. Sorry, Alson, sorry for speaking.
No, I only have a very minor point to make, and that is on the idea of ecological possibility. I forgot if it is Angus or Nico that mentioned. Oh, probably it's Angus mentioned something about hypersaturated orange and something like that. I want to push back a little bit. I don't think this is entirely like this color olo may not be entirely ecologically impossible. Like if you think about the idea of having after image as an exhaustion of say the L cones, say if you're looking at a red image or red stimulus for long periods of time, that overstimulates or that it basically exhausts your L cone. And then when you shift directly to something that is very that the M cone is very sensitive to, then that may elicit a very similar color as a Olo color. So it may not be entirely ecologically impossible to have that experience. Although it may be because it is an after image, it's gonna be of course more transient. It's gonna be a bit like it's gonna fade a little bit quicker. But I don't think that is that may not be entirely impossible. It's just a small point.
Nico, you can go.
I was just about to ask if anyone has any other points. So
Okay, so yeah. So yeah, we just a little point on the discussion we were just having, and then something completely unrelated. One is that again, this thing that you can experience all without training. So I would take that to mean that it implies that it's really like a possibility that is already there in the brain. So it's a state that the brain can enter. Just it really just requires the right input. But maybe there's also the possibility that you're learning how to see all in the moment that you receive the input, which is maybe not very plausible. But if you tell me a story and every sentence that you say basically enters into my brain, it changes my brain, and so it changes some type of conceptual space that they have. So I don't know if it can be so quick this modification of the color quality space, but that's also a possibility that cannot be really completely neglected. But it's basically probably something that neuroscientists should say if that's possible or not. While the other related point is that well, it's not completely unrelated, but basically you can see all. Okay, let's assume that our brain is already able to experience all. It just needs the right kind of input. I'm not sure that people have never experienced all if that's the case, because take for example psychedelics. you know, when you take psychedelics, like your brain starts to work in such a different way that maybe, yeah, maybe you get to that type of, or you know, hallucination, even dreaming. Maybe no, because I think that maybe no, because maybe when you get these kind of experiences, you're getting them from your memory. And so you first you need to experience them, and then you need to basically retrieve them as memories. But you know, it's not impossible to believe that, yeah, in some states, so you can experience that. So I don't know, maybe you know something about it. So if in these very strange states you can experience novel types of colors. I think I read in the past that they talk about a certain kind of blue that you can, some people under like very strong hallucinations can experience.
I don't have an answer, but I can imagine where an answer could come from. And essentially, in that case, is you need to figure out what are the neural correlates of color. And because if it turns out the case that, you know, like there is a difference between the cone that activate the input, so to say, and the neural substrate, if you want to use this expression, that actually feels the color, right? So if, you know, yeah, basically there could be a case where, you know, like the experience itself is simply triggered when you are, for example, wakeful or without the psychedelics. The experience itself is triggered from the outside, so to say. And so you require this very particular condition to be triggered. But it could also be the case that even without these very specific conditions, the experience can be, so to say, internally generated from other, like we don't know, for example, why we experience what we experience while we're dreaming. So, you know, in that sense, I think the only reasonable way to answer this question is figuring out the neural correlates of colors, those neural correlates, and then observing subjects under different conditions. And then you can probably have an answer. But it's clearly something a bit far ahead from where we are.
Yeah, but empirically though, I think Davida, you have like you've proposed a follow-up study, which is basically just to ask these participants whether they've dreamt of Olo since seeing it, or like to give them psychedelics and then see if
That's
they
what I wanted to propose. Just
spontaneously
LSD them.
found. Yeah, which I think it also I think it slightly goes back also to Zoe's point about this saturation and value sort of correlation, which is maybe people who have taken psychedelics might have experienced it, but experienced it in a different context. So in this study, the background is a gray it's just a gray sort of background. So if you have something which like looks bright or something like that, maybe it just looks very saturated. Whereas maybe if you're in psychedelic states, maybe you are experiencing these really hyper-saturated colors, but because everything like in the experience is also like super saturated or something, you just don't identify it as a new sort of experience. Maybe that could be the case as well. So yeah, and maybe a follow-up to do without psychedelics would be like to change the background to just like a really bright white or something like that. Yeah.
Okay, I think we are going on, like it has been almost 1.5 hours. So I will ask if anyone else has some other points maybe that you want to discuss quickly. if not, then I will say thank you for Angus for really summarizing this super complicated paper in a very well organized and understandable way. And thank you everyone else. This was such a cool discussion and very, very good points. So I was very happy to be part of it. And our little journal club will be back. So yeah, see you soon, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.